In this episode, let me give it a second. I didn't give it any minute there. Let me give it a let me let it breathe, as they say. Oh fuck, I was gonna wear my Southern Sky hoodie and I didn't. Should I go put it on real quick?
Yeah.
All right, give me 1 sec.
Yeah.
Little snug.
There we go.
Little snug.
You'll break it in.
Yeah. Just think skinny.
Think skinny.
I'll be all right. All right. In this episode of Common SENSimilla, we'll be talking to one of the most interesting people that we at CannaPlanners get to work with. As the director of technology for the Mississippi-based Medical Dispensary and CBD company, Southern Sky Brands, operating in a brand new market, just barely a year old. Our guest today has a lot on his plate. We share a similar background that I'm very eager to get into. DJ King Blind himself, he's here. Morgan Engle, welcome to Common SENSimilla. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great to see you.
Well, I'm jealous. Everybody, whenever, and we kind of mentioned it in the intro there, but full disclosure, Southern Sky and you in particular are clients of CannaPlanners. So as my kind of evolution happens with the company, like, things change, and I don't get to be on the client calls. I don't know the clients the same way that I used to a couple years ago. It's just part of the game. Like I now have employees who have, handle all these relationships, and it's bittersweet. And especially when like the whole team's on a call with Southern Sky and I'm sitting in my office being like, what are you guys doing?
Who are you talking to? Why are you laughing?
You sound like you're having fun.
I truly, and I mean this with all my heart, we look forward to those calls, and we are normally tears coming down our face laughing about something. We love you guys. You guys are a huge asset to our company.
It's a big part of, that's, I wish I could say every client interaction that we always have is like that. And a lot of them are, but really like the success of all of anything that we do really comes down to that trust and being able to like have a convivial relationship and just, be cool humans who just want to crush it. And luckily we all have that in common. So I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah.
I want to talk about music if we can. We might not even talk about weed and except for me rocking the hoodie and you rocking the tee, like we might not even talk about Southern Sky in this thing. We might just talk about music.
I live and breathe Southern Sky, so I'm happy to talk about both.
well, let's start at the beginning. So
okay.
Talk to me about a little bit about your history of music and maybe even a bit about your radio show.
Yeah. So I went to school for music originally, and as any sort of aspiring musician, I joined bands and toured around a bunch. I grew up in Southern California originally, and then moved to Seattle, Washington, and then my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, and a friend of ours had a bright idea that we'd move to Atlanta, Georgia, and open up a club. So we did that sort of. I'd never been in the state of Georgia before. My dad's from Alabama and my mom was from Kentucky. And I'd been all through the South, but you would always sort of turn up and stop at Alabama. I'd never been in Georgia until the day that I moved there in a moving truck with everything that I owned.
Mm-hmm.
So we rolled into that state and did that for about 8 years. And during that time was fortunate enough.
When was that? Like
early 2000s.
Early 2000s?
Early 2000s, yeah. And played drums and with a bunch of different bands and had fun. It was great. And then sort of my minor in school was computer science. Thank God. You can only be a musician for so long.
Totally.
And then I came back to the Pacific Northwest and worked for big advertising companies. I worked for Microsoft Advertising. I worked for Nordstrom Corporate and worked in business development there and a lot of different things. And then my brother-in-law runs Southern Sky Brands. We're a brand, like you said. We're a brand. We're a seed to store. So we have it's quite an operation. We have a 70,000 square foot facility in Canton, Mississippi, which is a suburb of Jackson, the capital. We'll be opening dispensaries and we'll be selling to dispensaries, but we are, just getting our product to market, and it's it's crazy seeing like the evolution of that whole thing. And it's sort of that background in music and like having no idea what you're doing, opening a club and like going in there and just sort of a total startup mentality.
Yeah.
Help me sort of get through the things that I'm going through now. That sort of like, if you can like get to your life where you live on slices of pizza and sleeping on people's floors.
Yeah.
You're not scared of a lot of things. Truly.
Let me ask you this, because this is kind of what I want to spend the first bit of this interview talking to you about is kind of the life on the road mentality, and especially like so just for context and just to share what we have in common, this company CannaPlanners is full of musicians, and it's full of washed up musicians.
Sure.
We're a bunch of washed up. The only one still working is our CMO Zach, who plays drums in like 4 different bands around town in Burlington, and crushes it and loves it. The rest of us are maybe a little more typical in our stage of life, where maybe we're still a little bitter. We still have a little slice of resentment in us, a little bit of that, maybe still carrying around a chip on our shoulder for why we didn't play at the Fillmore or Radio City or any of those things. But I'm curious, because at that time, and I've talked about this a couple of times with a few other musical guests who have musical backgrounds, but I'm curious your insight. So Josh Cleaver and I are the creative director for CannaPlanners, and myself, we were in a band together, and we toured the country for years together, sleeping on floors of shitty hotels or not even hotels, motels, which makes those floors even shittier. Sharing slices of pizza, being really like actually poor, and not really having the perspective. Obviously hindsight's 2020. So I'm curious, like, while you were in it. And drums, man, because it's not like you had a roadie. You don't go out on the road you don't start off being a successful band. You carrying those drums. I'm carrying all these guitars. It gets to be tiresome. But I'm curious, like, were you aware of kind of the Jack Kerouacian nature of life at the time? Were you self-aware to be like, I'm living life, and maybe this isn't what forever will look like, but I'm going to understand and contextualize these experiences? Because I will say I did not.
Yeah, we had two sayings in some bands I was in, and most predominantly we said "kill tomorrow tonight."
Yeah, that's so interesting.
It was very much sort of in the moment, and it wasn't until we when you're in the southeastern United States, you have this dream of playing New York City, and you drive up to New York and you come back and you played to 2 people, and then you played to 10 people, and you played 100 people, and you played to 1,000 people. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Just doing that route and kind of going back and forth and doing that sort of thing. There's moments in there, and this is just to date myself. Nobody has cell phones. We have maps that we've sat in the practice room and highlighted the route up to up to Boston and back down. And just sort of went for it, and just sort of blindly, like, I remember like pulling over and trying to find enough change to call the promoter to make sure that, what time load-in was, because or you would call, like 2 weeks before the tour started, you'd call everybody at once and be like, that's it, and just hope everybody remembered everything that's happened. And unbelievably, most of the time it just sort of worked out.
I don't think I've told this story on the podcast, but I can remember clearly arriving to a gig in Cleveland, and we would do the same thing. Now, granted, we had internet access, this is in the early 2000s. So it's, limited. Our cell phones are StarTAC flip phones. So they're not, very helpful, but we do the same thing. We would confirm, all the legs of the tour. And I can remember rolling into this club, and we got there, we'd been on the road for 6 weeks, and you roll into the club at like 11 a.m. or, noon or something. And you got to just hang out for 10 hours before you hit the stage. And I can remember walking into this place and opening the kitchen door, meeting the owner and saying, "Hey, we're the band tonight." And he goes, "Oh yeah, just I'll be right out." And then watching him run like through the window, run away. He ran away. Because he forgot that like he'd gone out of business. He forgot to cancel all the bookings. So he just He literally were like, "Hey, isn't that the guy?"
Wow.
So you take you learn some lessons on the road, right? I mean, you just, beyond experiencing life, like there's for sure business lessons happening out there, and professional just hurdles left and right.
Yeah, I mean, just the sort of resourcefulness. Being resourceful is an absolute understatement. I don't know how bands. It wasn't easy to tour then, and it's not easy to tour. I mean, it's probably harder to tour now because
it's got to be harder to tour now. Yeah, beyond COVID, like I can't even imagine. Like even like are people in? Do people even join real bands anymore, or is it all?
I mean, I know a lot of musicians.
Get off my lawn!
And warts and all, people still join bands and play music, and I ran into COVID, and my wife and I would go on these miles and miles. We walk 5-10 miles and walk, and I would start just thinking about music, and I couldn't play. There's nobody to play with, can't be around people. And that's originally when I started my podcast. It's called the Big Beat Music Podcast. That's at DJKingblind.com. And
we will link it in the description for sure.
Yeah, and I did DJKingblind.com as a sort of just an outlet, like a creative outlet, and things. So I did 105 of those in a row, like without fail, doing every single one. And then I was sort of 105 ideas, sort of in a row. You know, it was a little.
And let's explain real quick. Like you're actually, so the show you're not just playing music. I mean, you do that, but the first, 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes of the show, are you, doing a monologue about whatever that particular show is about. So you did one about, happy songs, and you would talk about why these songs are happy. By the way, I have, we'll go through this later, but I'd like to do we're going to update some of these lists, and I'm curious some of your opinions, but sure. Yeah. So you do this monologue and then play the music.
Then talk about it. And then I realized everything was planned out, and sort of the beauty and playing in bands and knowing friends that own bars and all that. I DJ'd on the side, always records. All vinyl, about 99% of the time. And so I did that for a long time, and I came up with this name DJ Kingblind as a spinoff of this David Sedaris story. I saw David Sedaris live, and he anyways, I came up with Kingblind based upon this joke that David Sedaris had, and just started doing that. And I was reached out to this little radio station in Portland, Oregon called Shady Pines Radio, and they had seen my podcast or listened to my podcast and said, did I want to DJ? And I said, I don't live in Portland, Oregon. And they said, you can remote in to our radio station. So if Thursdays at 10 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, I do that, and I remote in, and I live DJ. And live DJing is a whole, like, if you want to talk about like having a little more resolution, not sitting down and playing in a band with friends, live DJing on air while and I can see people like listening and things like that, and you get thousands and thousands of people listening to that, is a pretty invigorating experience, even though I'm in my crazy little office here, and you can probably see turntables behind me.
Sure. I have that exact Stanton deck.
Oh, nice. They're cheap and they work well. So yeah, it was very, cathartic sort of working through things. So I've done 56 in a row of Shady Pines Radio, and that's called Kings of the Vinyl Frontier.
And is there a format like you specifically are following, or are you just trying to expose whatever you're feeling? They just kind of give you some free reign, or
sort of the same. The same initial thought was when I first started doing it was like rock and punk and northern soul and sort of all things in between. And then it really got a lot more broad. That spectrum really went out, and sometimes it's just whatever I have on a recording of, and I have a lot of records. So it's pretty formatless at this time. You know what I mean? I don't play a lot of bossa nova or things like that, but like tonight's episode is all music from, there's a really great record store where I live called Easy Street Records, and you'll always see people like, there's no good new bands. I buy these records. There's no good new bands.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
New bands?
Huh?
Who are some good new bands that you're listening to?
I like Fontaine's DC. It's an Irish band called Fontaine's DC. I like Idols quite a bit.
Okay.
Idols are from
Yeah, I know them.
Bristol. Um, Mets, they're not particularly new band. They're a sub pop band. METZ, they're Canadians. Civic is a good band. Viagra Boys, if you've ever heard of
Great
them.
name. That sounds like a punk band.
Oh, they're a punk band for sure. Yeah, Snapped Ankles, they're another English band.
Definitely a great punk band name.
Yeah, it's great. I would like the biggest recommendation like that I can give to people is every morning my wife and I get up and BBC Six Music. There's this DJ. His name is Mark Riley. He's on at 11 a.m. Pacific time, so you can translate that to wherever you are. And he used to be the bass player in The Fall, a famous post-punk band. And every day that guy's just dropping music where you're like, what is this? And it's about, I don't know, 85% new stuff. If you think that you live in a town where, or an area where you can't find new music and you need inspiration, BBC Six Music, you can go to their website or download the app for free. It's like a spring of indie
Cool.
inspiration. It's beautiful. And KEXP.org.
Love
here.
KEXP.
Yeah, KEXP is pretty good, but I think BBC is my winner. BBC Six Music and certain DJs, Gideon Coe and Mark Riley are very inspirational.
That's awesome. I think I just my employees finally shamed me into getting a Spotify account.
Okay.
Been such an old man and just using a Pandora account for the last forever, and
Yeah.
finally got myself a Spotify account. And you can do this thing where we actually, the office, everybody in the office, we have like, we can share our accounts.
Yeah.
And it, like, the algorithm takes bits of all the music that everybody is individually listening to and creates new playlists.
Yeah.
So I'm constantly getting exposed to new music now because everybody in my company is way younger than I am. So it's important. I mean, I hadn't been listening to new music in so long, I just get stuck in the same shit I'd been listening to since I was like 12, like how many live Grateful Dead albums could I possibly listen to? Every one of them.
All of them. If you
Yeah.
go, so yeah, it's great. We shouldn't have a Spotify conversation because I do adore what that company can do, but I hate what they do to musicians. They do nothing
Yeah.
for musicians, and they're killing people that I know's livelihood.
Well, find me a hero in the music industry and I'll find you a villain.
That's true. Yeah.
If it wasn't Spotify, it was,
It would be someone else. It'd be Apple.
Yeah,
It'd be Amazon. It'd be something.
Capitol Records.
Truly, yeah. But as long as people are listening to music, it's really good.
Absolutely. And going to see music, that's where these bands make their money. Like, really, it's like the t-shirts you buy and the hoodies, and like that's the stuff. That's the stuff that actually.
I don't know that people
pays their
realize
bills.
actually how much it really makes a difference.
Yeah.
Expensive,
Yeah. What band I've been hearing about a couple bands recently who have been, on the surface, observer would be like, these guys are crushing it. They're playing medium to largish size rooms, but they're hanging it up because they're not making any money, because there's some fine line between, what you can do in the clubs in terms of making money and then arenas. That thing in the middle is really like a huge spectrum, and it's either very expensive to play a theater or, so
I don't know how much you know about metal, but there's a Atlanta band called Mastodon. They won Grammy
I
Awards.
love Mastodon.
They sell a lot of records.
Yeah.
And they can't make a living touring and playing music. And when they were on Relapse, this little label, and when they got signed to this Warner subsidiary, the very first thing that happened, their management said, okay, you're going to make money and you're going to start buying property. Every bit of money that you have, you're going to start buying houses. You're going to do this sort of thing. The very first deal you're going to make is with, I think it was Spencer's Gifts. Spencer's like in the mall.
Yeah, in the mall.
And we're going
Blacklight poster store.
We're going to make all of these t-shirts, and you're going to have an exclusive deal to sell to like these stores like this all over the world, these exclusive license agreements, because this is how you're going to make money. Here's, 10,000 shirts, and they pay for 10,000 shirts all at once. And we're going to keep doing these recurring deals with them with these different sort of Spencer's and stores like that all over the world. So they worked on like marketing deals. They work they're in movie soundtracks. They're in, all sorts of things. They're on Cameo, Cameo where you can like say,
Yeah.
hey, Bill from Mastodon, happy birthday,
Yep.
Cindy. You know what I mean? They do cameo appearances. They give guitar. You can go to a Mastodon show, and if you email them in advance and want to learn their songs, you can sit backstage with them, and they'll show you how to play the guitar parts. They're scrappy people that want to play music for a living, and that's how they've won a Grammy, Will, and they do this. That's how hard things are out there.
Yeah, that's wild.
It's mind-boggling.
What was the final straw for you? Was there one? Like just in terms of like living on the road and doing that whole thing, like what was it for you?
It was a combination of I needed to remain married. And it was that bars in Atlanta then closed at 4 a.m. So if you weren't if you were on tour or you were not on tour, if you're not on tour, you're in a club working. That's your job, right?
Yeah.
And you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. If you're a musician, you're not going to bed till like 4 or 5 in the morning. So you just realize the people that God bless them. There's a lot of kooky people that go to bed at 6 o'clock in the morning every day. And it's just sort of wears on that. You can't I didn't go to brunch for like nearly a decade because I had to sleep.
Yeah.
I never had lunch. You know what I mean? There was no concept of lunch or time or people or holidays or things you had to do. Your whole world was in this totally different access than everyone else. And when you would come off the road, you felt like there was this really weird, like sticker shock of getting back to like humanity and then not talking to the same 4 people that were in the van with me, that I had to interact with other people about. I didn't have a schedule anymore. I didn't know what time I had to be at sound check. I didn't know when I was supposed to feed myself. You start going crazy, man.
Yeah.
You're in this, touring, you're in this weird system.
I do. I do. And I actually, what you bring up is really interesting. And it's actually a note I have here. So like what you're talking about, I relate to completely. And it's not being a prima donna or a diva, like what you're saying. Like I didn't know where to be and I needed someone to tell me, like that's actually true because your brain, it's because you get stupider. Like honestly, your brain is getting dumber, and it's not that you need someone to like, I'm too good to know where I'm supposed to be because I'm in the band or whatever. It's like I literally don't know where I even am right now. Like I don't know, what city is this?
But that whole joke of like we're like, and you see it.
Yeah, like the Simpsons episode when the Simpsons episode where like it's like Metallica or the Who, and they're like good night, and they look at the back of the guitar and they're like Springton. It's like that. It's like where are we?
But it would say on the top of set list, it would say cities.
Yeah.
To make sure you always wrote at the top. So if you were just like where did Columbus, Ohio go? I don't even like.
Or being in Columbus and saying good night, Cleveland.
But whatever. But you would write them, and bands to this day still do it. You just are like,
right.
You live a sort of compartmentalized sort of lifestyle, and it's
okay. So here's what I want to get to, because I remember this. Like that feeling actually brought me a lot of sadness, because what I would do is I'd be in the van or whatever, and we'd be on whatever highway in middle America, and I'd be thinking about my friends I graduated college with who were like working for Lehman Brothers or some bullshit, you know what I mean? And I'd be like, that's the life that's what I'm missing. And they were just living life. Like I would just project onto them what I thought like being a normal person looked like, because that's what all my friends from school they were just being normal people. They weren't living this vampiric lifestyle of,
it is a vampiric lifestyle. That's well said.
Well, and so I remember that feeling, and it was like really depressing, being like, holy shit, like I'm now 27 and like I don't even know how to balance my checkbook. I don't even know what state I'm in right now. And my friends are getting married, or they just got promoted, or he just bought a house. Like, how the fuck did he buy a house? Like, I don't even know how to tie my shoes. I can't even plug my guitar in by myself. You know what I mean? Like all these things, but being like, and that was part of the thing that eventually led to for me, the destruction of my band and the end of my sort of existence on the road, which is, the grass is always greener. And for me, like, I didn't particularly like playing in the club until 3 in the, like in those southern states, you'd play till 3 in the morning. In New York City, there's no closing time. The bar closes when the last patron leaves. And that could be like 6, 7, 8 in the morning. Like it's insane.
Yeah, it's not scalable. This is not healthy. And then you're eating terribly. You drink too much. You sleep like crazy.
You're not making any money.
You're not making I remember like being just so broke. Our guitar player was a relatively handsome individual, and we would send him out to like go talk to those girls and sell T-shirts because we don't have any gas money.
Yeah.
Like we just ate with the money that they paid us. We have no way to get out off the highway, onto the highway.
Yes.
It was like everyone go like quit what you're doing and go sell something. It was our only you want to talk about a hard sell. You want to buy this single, you want to buy this CD, you want to buy this T-shirt. Like they weren't leaving until somebody handed us some money. Well,
talk to me about like being, discovering your entrepreneurial roots, or at least being able to figure out, how to be self-sufficient with what you've got, which is a stack of CDs and a bunch of T-shirts.
Well, we toured with this band from San Diego called Deadbolt, and those guys were so great at selling merchandise and so resourceful and so cheap that they would go to like Costco's or Walmart's on tour and buy shirts. And then they'd be in the hotel room. They're like, what are you doing? It's like, we're making shirts. What are you guys doing? And you're like, what are they talking about? And they could screen their own shirts in bathrooms, which would destroy the shower in a bathroom in a motel, and screen all of their own shirts. And they're like this chemically induced coma that they were in from hanging T-shirts, because then you go to sleep with 50 T-shirts hanging up that are full of chemicals.
Yeah.
Sleep, wake up, shake them off, throw them in the box, and you had 50 more T-shirts. But they were pulling their own shirts.
Yep.
Just because it was so much cheaper.
Yeah. That's crazy. Well, talk to me about that, like assimilating back into, non-band life. Like what were those months like after you kind of put the drums down for a minute professionally and we're trying to get back into, get your sleep back, eat dinner at a normal hour, maybe sleep 8 full hours? Yeah.
So, it was sort of
getting a job.
Getting a job was interesting. But I had, like I said, my minor did sort of help that I was always like the guy if something broke at the club or something, or the POS system went down or whatever. They didn't call people. I was the guy that was able to fix it, which was a pretty handy trait to have. Yeah. But it was just sort of coming back. I guess by the time I left Atlanta, you kind of come back to the Pacific Northwest, which is a very tech-centric place.
Yeah.
I just sort of fell into that.
And you're surrounded. Microsoft's from there, there's so much is happening up there.
Yeah, it's Microsoft and Amazon and Facebook and Apple, and like all of the offices are here.
Yeah.
They have like city blocks of Amazon building and spheres and like Microsoft campuses that are the size of universities and things like that. Microsoft has 235,000 employees. I think people realize the scale of those companies. So I came back and I worked for this advertising company, and I was really interested in the concept of advertising and the do's and don'ts of what you're able to do. And I worked for this company called Atlas. And Microsoft and Google were at this advertising holy war with each other. And Atlas got purchased by Microsoft and became Microsoft Advertising. And our competitors, DoubleClick, got purchased by Google. But we got purchased for $6.5 billion, which was a record at the time. It like broke some sort of record. But that taught me this sort of foundational thing of this very small company that was infused with a bunch of cash, where it was sort of the opposite effect of like you're being scrappy, but like what happens if you're able to make this sort of tool and influence advertising decisions, and then you suddenly had a limitless budget? What does that war look like? What does that sort of thing look like? So you sort of change from being like starved and fed and trying to figure out how to do things with nothing to being given too much. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want Thanksgiving dinner. I just need a taco.
Right.
But it helped you sort of balance resources. And then naturally, as sort of startups do, when you have access to too much information and or too much resources and you sort of waste through it, you realize what you've done to budgets and things like that. Because they
Yeah.
set something in front of us was sort of a lesson in humility to figure out that we wouldn't screw the whole thing up. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And just to be able to sort of balance that act. But it went from like balancing things on a West Coast level to balancing things on an international level. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
sort of
Wildly different.
wildly different. And that sort of those lessons in Seattle really translated into a pretty lean team that we have in Canton, Mississippi at Southern Sky, that we all have. Steve Merritt, the CEO of the company, is my brother-in-law. So he called me because I knew that I had a solid tech and advertising background. Our director of marketing and our director of retail and wholesale, Steve, used to run his own business called the Flight Station that made like luggage and sold uniforms to Delta Airlines. He used to like figure out how to make his own luggage in his garage with his business partner. This is like a highly driven individual to figure out how I'm going to succeed and do this and put food on the table for my family is like mind blowing. So when someone like that, I love him, he's family. Someone like with that sort of wherewithal comes at you, hey, I'm going to work for this marijuana company. We're going to build a 70,000 square foot facility. And I was like, my experience with cannabis was I didn't smoke weed. I've had cancer twice.
Hmm.
And my experience with it was from getting over those treatments and being sick and getting over nausea and things like that and using it, that sort of thing. I
Yeah.
just didn't like, I could party and drink and do mushrooms or whatever. I just didn't do good smoking pot. It just kicked my butt too much. I
Sure.
used to be a pretty heavy cigarette smoker, and I just wasn't good at smoking weed, and I'm still not particularly good at it. But I really understood the thing. This sort of lightning bolt in my head was that I felt this really weird disconnection because I was working with this company where I didn't understand the benefit of this product that we had.
I see. Well,
And then
let's talk. Let me ask you about that real quick because you're in Seattle, right? You're in the Pacific Northwest, so you're
Yeah.
exposed to the biggest market, legal marketplace, the oldest legal marketplace in the
Huge.
country. It's
Yeah.
absolutely enormous. Even all of it. Every state up around your area is crushing it. So you must at least be anecdotally aware of the industry and kind of what's happening. I'm sure there's dispensaries in your town, maybe even near you. Like you
Lord.
see these businesses pop up. What was and Steve, your brother-in-law, calls you one day, like, what are you thinking beyond believing in your brother-in-law, which is that's awesome. I love that familial just trust. That's great. But I'm curious, like, what was the opportunity? Like, what did you see in terms of like a future? Because let's face it, Mississippi, it just went medical, right? It's not
Yeah.
particularly known to be the most progressive of the 50 states. What opportunity did you see there that you weren't seeing in your own backyard? Again, beyond your brother-in-law.
There's two things. One, I saw
Hit me with it.
what cannabis could do. There's 21 conditions that will be growing that people can qualify to get cannabis for in the state of Mississippi. And I saw what that actually did. I don't really think of cannabis. I think a lot of people think of cannabis and think of like fun and getting high and like a release or something like
Sure.
like having a cocktail. I don't. I think about like how like terrible I felt and the sort of relief that I got from it. I think about it very medicinally.
You mean coming out of like going through cancer treatments, how terrible you
Twice,
felt,
yeah, and like
and what
it
cannabis
doesn't
can
get
do.
easier. It's not like, oh, this is the second
Sure.
time's easier.
Yeah, I'm a vet at this. I know what I'm doing.
Your body gets smarter and it changes things and it makes it worse for you. So it was even worse still. So the opportunity to be able to like create something where you're actually helping people, as we would say in advertising, we used to say at Microsoft, we worked in the digital landfill business because we made digital landfill. Advertising's important and makes the internet free and blah, blah, blah. It's digital landfill. It's noise. There's the reason there's ad blockers and something. You're not really like, it's not soul fulfilling work.
It's not meaningful content.
It's not. And the opportunity every day,
Usually.
truly, to feel like that I'm learning something. Like right before you and I talked, I'm on the phone with our marketing director, Cindy, and we have these she's a great friend of mine. We have these sort of great tug of wars, like trying to figure out which is the best. And the discussion we were having is like, what's the most effective way to educate people that are just us make an assumption about marijuana? You know what I mean? They make an assumption about what this thing is, but they don't really know it all. And how do we educate these people and have them understand what a terpene is or an endocannabinoid system? And all of those things that we do, we knew going into this that we had this sort of vault of information that we were going to. And to be honest with you, there's no other company in Mississippi or that I can find in the southeastern United States and most of America that has so much of a focus. Everyone talks about wanting to educate the consumers every day. And you guys are a part of that tool for us, writing blog posts and the SEO that we do and the videos that we make and like the maps that we have to help people find practitioners. We're offering all of these sort of tools and educational resources that don't exist in other places. And every day, like we get letters from people talking about like how grateful they are and like what we're able to do. We started off initially because we realized we had this giant facility that we had to build and it's going to take a whole lot of time. We wanted to come to market first and sort of like flex our marketing muscle to figure out what to do. Is how we ran into you because there wasn't enough of us to be able to do it and we didn't have a budget. So we said, I'm going to go find some people that can kind of help us with this because we're really smart at marketing products and advertising products, but we're not smart about cannabis and the legalities of it and the do's and don'ts and like what is impactful to people and what isn't. And we didn't have the time to like sit and call 500 dispensaries up or walk in and talk to people. We needed sort of a lightning rod of knowledge and, a business compass. And truly, I know we said we weren't going to talk about CannaPlanners, but that's what you guys do for us is you're sort of this true north for us. But it's true. Like we have a really good relationship with you, but we have so much going on day to day. Like you are Southern Sky employees. I mean, you're on our monthly payroll, but you guys sort of help us do this thing and help us sort of translate, issues that we're sort of trying to work through. That's not just cannabis level problems, but it's like Southern level problems. People make a lot of misconceptions about the South, and some people are spot on about the way they think. They're sort of scared of something that they're not aware of. They think something's going to be maybe this sort of great evil, and then they sort of learn about these things.
This is a huge responsibility that and it's often a topic on this podcast, which is there's a responsibility that cannabis companies, whether it's a CBD company, a medical dispensary, or the dopest, hippest dab rig company, whatever you are, wherever you fall in the spectrum of cannabis company, it doesn't matter because you have a responsibility to educate no matter what your brand focus is, like what your brand kind of messaging is, it doesn't matter. There still should be a responsible educational component. And that's just smart business. Beyond it being a smart tactic, it's smart business for the exact reason what you're talking about, Morgan, which is, and this isn't just the South, this is nationally, we could assume some huge percentage of people in this country who aren't investigating the uses of cannabis because they've been brainwashed by Nixonian regulations or fucking Nancy Reagan or cops, like any of those things. They've had a huge impact on this country. So if you're a good business person, you're thinking about normalization in terms of not only like responsibility to the plant, but the responsibility to unbrainwash all these people who might be your customer.
But it's what we do every single day. I mean, to the point where the state of Mississippi for a short period of time made it so our website, and we had this panic call with Beth and Ryan and Zach, we couldn't have cannabis imagery up.
Right.
Which they realized that was sort of silly.
Right.
And part of this normalization that you talk about, is that, you know what I mean?
It's totally that. It's totally that. And to you and I, that sounds like what? Like that sounds ridiculous. on the scale of ridiculousness from state regulation, from a state regulatory standpoint, not ridiculous. There's way stupider things happening in cannabis regulation than not being able to show pictures of cannabis on your own cannabis company website. Like, so
great. Like, what do you think we're selling? Like,
yeah, but to your point, that's right. Like, to your point, you're spot on about the responsibility of normal, of spreading a message of normalization to everybody. It starts with the legislators, who probably they don't get it, and they have to be the mediator between, the lobbyist or, the cannabis business person and their constituents. They have to then go back and say, like, here's, it's a nightmare. So yes, creating content, and content is just one part of it. It should be, your messaging, your company culture, every aspect of your brand should be, there should be part of it is, to add to your bottom line. And the other half of it should be to educate and, unbrainwash people.
And that's why we started making CBD tinctures, oils, lotions, balms, gummies, is to, what's a beautiful product page look like? How do we start telling the story of like healing with CBD, and how do we talk about the endocannabinoid system? How do we talk about these percentages? So by the time we get to flower and we're selling that sort of thing, which we're doing now, we had this sort of like, hey, this works with people. This doesn't work with our consumers. This is impactful. This isn't impactful. So we were able to and come up with a revenue stream while we're waiting to actually sell marijuana to people. But it was a great sort of exercise that we were lucky enough to be able to have this interim period. And that's where you guys came in, because we have to make we have to make a store, which we've made with WooCommerce with you guys, that we'll have to take down to build another store again, because when we get dispensaries open. But we're having it's all of these sort of things.
Yeah, it's evolving and finding the right partners to do it with you. And again, I appreciate your compliments on my team and the work we've done for you. We've loved every second of it. It's always exciting. Here we are, CannaPlanners up in Burlington, Vermont. Zach had a gig. It was supposed to have a gig this weekend, and this is not bullshit. The gig was he's supposed to have a gig on Saturday night, canceled because they're expecting -40-degree temperatures. So they canceled the gig. Anyway, like, that's all to say, like, it's so fun to be able to like have an impact on markets so far away from Burlington. Like, we got our toes dipping in Mississippi, and it's awesome. We love seeing what's happening there. So let me ask you this, because your transition from a purely a CBD company to now a medical dispensary, which that happened.
A medical brand.
Brand that happened pretty quick with dispensaries. Right, with dispensaries on the way.
Yeah.
How do you think? And I know it's so soon to tell because you haven't yet opened the retail, but like, how are you already planning out for an eventual rec market? Because that's how this works, right? First medical comes, and usually, I imagine for most states it takes many, many years before rec market follows the medical market. But I have a feeling it's going to be a little quicker in Mississippi. But I'm curious, like, how you're already thinking about that.
So we have to think about several things. We have to think about initially our patient count, right? And what our patient count is, it's about 2,000 people, which is very, very, very low. If you think about like Arkansas, which is about a similar economic condition and population as we are, there are about 64,000 people. We've only about a weekend of selling marijuana.
Right, it's brand new.
It's brand new. It's been, a year plus that we've been sort of this company and building things and selling things, but it's getting there'll be many, many dispensaries. I think there's only 10 dispensaries open right now, and there's 2 labs. But there's all of these cultivators having product, and they're like, and only 2 labs to put them into. So there's this sort of bottleneck effect. So we have to get the patient count up. We have to, the entire time, build our dispensary and build a network of dispensaries, which will grow and thrive and, and sort of normalize. And we have to get to the point of normalization where they see in the South, I believe, the benefit of normalizing the message to people and the benefit that growing legal cannabis in the state does economically for a state that really needs money. You know what I mean? The economic impact that cannabis can have potentially in the Magnolia State is substantial. It can be, if things go as we hope, it's going to be one of the largest, not the largest crop in the entire state. Which is
I will say, in my experience, having gone through this in a couple different states, that, and it's weird because you would think the opposite is true. Legislators don't necessarily, that is not necessarily important to legislators. The amount of potential tax revenue that cannabis sales could potentially generate is almost irrelevant to them. It's always going to come down to public safety and kids, always, like always, always. And so as long as you can speak to that, and you can point to other states and how, because that's always the argument, and how you can defeat that argument, because it's just like, that's normalization. The arguments, the arguments you'll hear will be the same sort of things that have been echoed through prohibition over the last 100 years when it comes to cannabis. So they'll be easy to kind of take down, especially by you guys, especially by Steve, who can talk like the best of them. Making sure that you guys are well equipped to, making money is one thing, but it's how do we handle public safety on this? And you guys will have that under wraps, I'm sure.
Yeah, for sure. And it's something that we talk about all the time. It's part of the story that we tell, and we just recently did again in our blog post that we worked on together, is just even the way our products grown and how our products different. Like there's not a lot of places that grow cannabis that grow them in food grade facilities. We're a medical and food grade facility. We have, if you manufacture food, it has different paint on the wall. They don't use normal paint. They do things that don't collect bacteria and things like that. We're to that level of detail in our state, making sure that we have the safest medicine for the people of Mississippi. There's a tremendous amount spent every single day to ensure that sort of level of detail and safety for people. And it's like you said, some of that just takes time as well.
Yeah. Talk to me about that a little more. I'm curious, what Steve and some of the other, you and the other boots on the ground, what are you guys hoping your impact is in Mississippi? What's Southern Sky doing differently?
I think we're doing everything differently.
Great.
It sort of confuses me, and this is going to sound like I'm tooting my own, or we're tooting our own horn, but maybe we are.
You go, girl. Go for it.
I just said, I don't understand. We know who our competitors are, or even in the region. Why aren't they doing anything? And Steve says, Morgan, I don't think they know what to do. You have this background. Cindy has this marketing, has been a great marketing director, and Hunter has this great sales experience. They don't have that sort of experience. We had,
you will find this more and more, which is and I'm not, no pun intended, but a greenness to how this, how people approach this industry there. And it's a lot different now than it was when I got into it, but the business acumen used to be non-existent. Now there are companies like you that have a marketing director who has an experience outside of cannabis, and a sales director who, sold a bunch of stuff outside of, all these people who have outside industry experience, which is valuable, because that's how your company's going to grow. You have to kind of take what same with CannaPlanners. We all had, prior experience doing this outside of cannabis before bringing it to cannabis. It's hugely important. But yeah, Steve's absolutely right. You have to be thinking about this. I bet I would think probably none of them have ever started businesses before. And
Steve has,
I mean competitors and things like that.
Oh no, I don't think so. But a whole lot of things. I mean, an example of things we do different is the way everything's built, the way things are clean, the amount of sort of filtration in the air and on the walls, and the cleanliness, and the rules and procedures that we use. We regularly give tours of our facility. Most of our competitors and most companies are very you cannot come here. We're very open. We have such a great relationship with our city in Canton, the mayor of Canton is a medical cannabis practitioner.
That's awesome.
That's unusual.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, there's a real belief in like what we're doing as a company and things like that. Like when we had our grand opening for the building, it was like the fire department was there, the police department was there, the mayors were there, local business owners. That whole message is to like not just us telling the message. We're like on the ground getting people into our facility, and like the gospel that is Southern Sky Brands and the gospel that is the benefits of medical marijuana in the state of Mississippi are being spread on a daily basis by all of us. And we're trying to sort of make that gospel not just, it's about us, but it's also about like these sort of benefits of like the crippling like opioid addiction that exists in the southeastern United States, and like real relief that people need. Like I said, I run the info at, I get all the email from info@southernsskybrands.com, and people all the time just saying like, thank you so much. You know, I was on these painkillers and doctors just keep giving me more pain pills, and how much your medicine's helping me. But it's crazy. Like, it's wonderful to be able to hear
It's
that
beautiful.
sort of thing from individuals. It's moving,
Yeah, it definitely is.
to be able to tell them that. So like, it makes you happy that we all made the decision to believe in Steve's vision of moving things forward to, to make this thing for people. And it's, we're going to laugh 6 months from now, we'll laugh a year from now about like, you're stubbing toes and walking into walls. But I
Sure.
think that initial CBD launch and doing that sort of thing made it so we're bumping into walls a lot less.
Absolutely.
You realize you're worrying about the wrong sort of things, or you're messaging the wrong sort of whatever, you know what I mean? Or the type of relationships that you're building. We sort of learned all of that in advance because we were having this message going the entire time. And like the number of like construction update videos, you can tell like how many steel beams are in our building because we do updates all the time. Like, we're here, we're doing this. Our building's still not done, but we're like, we have grow rooms and curing rooms and all of that sort of thing. It's still being finished. It's crazy.
How is the first few weeks been? I mean, obviously, you sounds like you're getting some good feedback from some of your customers. Like, what?
Yeah, it's just
what
sort
marketing challenges are you running into, or not running into, as you were trying to like grow a brand in this brand new, fresh space?
I think the first thing that I still think we need a little bit more time to be able to sort of accurately answer the question with like what we've learned so far, because we're still
Sure.
learning. It's too new.
Yeah.
What we've learned so far is perpetually in the system, there's these sort of bottlenecks of like, hey, we have all this product and we're ready to go. And a regulation will change from the Mississippi Department of Health. So we have to do something slightly different. And then we go to like, there's all of these cultivators, right? And there's 2 labs. Like, that's a whole lot of product going through 2 labs. And let's say a piece of lab equipment breaks, or let's say there's been issues with metric. Not that there's anything wrong with metric, but that sort of reporting system. Occasionally, it broke in our seed to sale tracking system. Oh, it broke in the lab. It's like all of these sort of like start and stops. You feel like you're mildly been whiplashed the entire time. Sort of the process. The lesson, I guess, is just sort of to be patient and wait to hear back from people about things. But once that's done with the labs, like, transportation's another bottleneck. There's only so many transportation companies because it's new. We'll get there, but like things in Mississippi are like, scattered out all over the place to get products to people.
It's a big state.
Yeah, with not a lot of people in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's more people in the Seattle, Tacoma metropolitan areas than there is the entire state of Mississippi. But there's a lot of really cool things there, and a lot of like great areas to be selling these sort of products. But it's just sort of everyone getting their sea legs right now. So the lesson is patience. The lesson right now is patience and sea legs, and to realize that like everyone that you talk to's pretty much been through the same thing. You always think, what's happened? This has never happened before. Well, everything in cannabis has happened 10 million times before. And you just have to you get anxious because you're like, this is the thing I've been waiting for. And oh my God, the thing's here.
What's this week's problem? What's this week's fire that you had to put out?
What's this week's fire? We had to our grow panels, the thing that waters our plants,
Literally caught on fire.
it did not get it. It's full of water and liquid. But the thing that sort of controls those sort of plants, being able to speak to it, has been an issue going back and forth. We've just sort of regulated that, getting the cameras up, like getting. We're building like we're an operating business that's still being built out. So like things sort of all over the place. So you're like, we have to, legally have high definition recording of rooms and stuff like that, and sort of like a very clean, perfect area. And then this other corner of the building that's sealed off and a construction zone.
Yeah.
So every day there's sort of a new lesson of things that we're going through. It's just sort of,
especially when you're building a building.
Yeah. I mean, we're building a building from a dirt lot.
It's awesome.
And most people are like, oh, it was this thing before. It's like, it was dirt. And it wasn't, you know what I mean? And it was Mississippi mud. So you have to like dig out Mississippi mud and put a foundation so the building stays put.
Totally.
That's some loose land. But just everything. I mean, it's just like, you're putting in access points, you're putting in security systems, you're doing this, you're putting up fencing, you're getting a new, this or that. Every week's a new sort of challenge, but it doesn't seem, we have the people that make the decision, Steve and our grower, Brent Van Zyl and stuff like that, are very calm, cool, and collected individual. I think I'm wound up a little higher than they are, but so you can normally talk to them and they're just like, it's cool, we're going to figure this out. And we've, every single problem that we've had, we've solved every single problem that's come in front of us, and we'll solve every single one yet again. It's just, you're sort of trying not to make mountains out of molehills and all that sort of thing,
God bless, Morgan. God bless. Tell me about, again, it's also fresh. I think every success probably feels amazing for you guys. Is there something you're like particularly psyched about in the next couple of months as this all rolls out for you?
Well, Southern Sky Brands will be completed in the next few months. So having like, when our facility's done, that means our labs and our kitchen's open. So it means our products go beyond flour to gummies and lotions and tinctures and oils. That's really exciting. So our product quantity is going to double, triple.
Right.
And then right the second that happens, we start building dispensaries. We have our first one mapped out and have talked to the architects, and it's beautiful. We have these wonderful an educational format that we have for individuals where it's very generally, my general thought of dispensaries is I've never been in a dispensary like ever. I think they treat you like cattle, and you stand in line and you look at a product and you point it and you just hand it to you. There's no little, like, how do you want to feel? Like how, somebody walks in and here in Washington, like, how high do you want to get? What do you want your high to feel like? It's like, and I've stood in there and had trainings and stuff like that where they say, I've got headaches, or I've got this, or I need to sleep. And they're just like, this will knock you out. It's like, they don't want to be knocked out. Nobody has a conversation with people. Like, we want to have a conversation with people and sort of like, again, remove that sort of stigma. This is a brand new state, and have people understand like these different things do different things for you. This can help sort of relax you and reduce anxiety. This can be good for pain management. This can be good for,
Well, this will be especially important for medical dispensaries, and especially you guys, like, right? If the goal is to set the bar in Mississippi and nationally, let's be real. Because your sites are bigger than Mississippi, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But if the goal is to set this bar, then you have to be educating, especially on the medical level. Like, you have a huge responsibility to know what you're talking about. And it's not, bud tenders or associates, whatever you want to call them. Like, at the end of the day, like, there's a very high attrition rate for those types of positions. They come, they go, they don't know what they're talking about sometimes. And frankly, a lot of these things are subjective to human biology anyway. So like what's good for you may not be good for me, and all that. But on the that's recreation, buyer beware on the recreational side, but on the medical side, you do have a responsibility to kind of make sure that your patients are being educated on this, especially if they're coming in off opioids, especially if they've been brainwashed by, the war on drugs or whatever,
But they have,
or not, or if they just didn't use pot in their lifetime or whatever. But
so we're trying, and that's what we're doing now is we're breaking that down. We have a tremendous amount of information on our blogs that talk about these sort of benefits and how it can help you, what your dosaging should be like, what different sorts of THC are like, to the point now where we're talking about next month. Oh, it is next month. We start talking
what
about
year is it?
Seriously. We start talking about the breakdown of we want people to understand we plant something, we prune something, we cure something, this thing gets dried. Here's why it goes to a lab. Here's why COAs are important. It explains this lifespan of this is the seed and this is the store. And we're doing this blog series breaking down, we want you to understand when we're talking about a new strain, we're talking about part 4.
I love it.
Part 4 in the lifespan is here. And this is why it's important. And it helps reinforce the message of what we're doing is important, how we're being methodical, and how important it is to grow good medicine and how not all things are created equal. It's meant to be educational and as a product differentiator as well.
I love it. You got a lot on your plate, my man, and a lot to do in the coming months, years. There's a lot to be done, man. We are very happy to be a part of it with you. I can't wait to take a trip. I've never been to Mississippi, so I'm excited to come down and see the facility once when Steve sends the private plane to come get me.
That's right.
Yep, that's how I roll, buddy. But I'm expecting it. So I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to talk with us. We're, again, very psyched about what's happening in Mississippi and look forward to great things. Can you tell our listeners, viewers, whoever, my mom probably, where to learn more about Southern Sky? SouthernSkyBrands.com. We will link that in the description.
Yeah.
We'll put that.
Sign up for our newsletter. We'll keep you updated with everything. Oddly, CannaPlanners also helps us with our email newsletter. There's a guy named Will Romeo, the other Will, that helps us with that. He's a superstar.
We do it all. We do it all.
Not social media, though, Will. Not social media. You thought you're gonna.
You know what? The over/under on when you were going to mention social media. I think I won. Zach was convinced that it would come up earlier in the conversation. I told him I
was a little silver bullet I was saving.
Fuck social media. This has been another episode of Common SENSimilla. I've been your host, Will Reed. Please hit the like and subscribe button. We will see you next time. Morgan Engle, you've been an amazing guest. Thank you so much.
Amigos.
Peace out, everybody.